This is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Impressions Xchange podcast. I'm Ashley Roberts, managing editor of the Printing and Packaging Group at NAPCO Media. I have some very special guests on today's show who will be discussing the upcoming launch of a new global taxonomy for the printing industry. Marco Boer, VP IT Strategies, and David Zwang, principal of Zwang Company, will be here to discuss its purpose, potential impact on the industry, and its tentative launch date. Later in the episode, I will also be speaking with the one and only Mark Michelson, editor-in-chief of Printing Impressions. We will take some time to discuss why the global taxonomy is so necessary and how it could impact not just the industry at large, but how we as journalists write and talk about the industry. So Marco and David, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me today on the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Same here.
Yeah, great. So talk to me about this taxonomy. I know it's been in the works for a little bit, so can you tell me what it is?
I think maybe I'll start, David, and then you can chime in. So
Go for it.
I think we have to look first at the genesis of why we're doing this. So must have been a year ago now at this point, we were approached by Printing United Alliance to see if David and I could help them come up with a way to create a new taxonomy for the print industry, the global print industry, not just the US. And the reason for this request really, I think, had its origins in the fact that our US government is no longer actively tracking the print industry. The Bureau of Labor Statistics stopped tracking print jobs and the likes. And frankly, we think they're wrong. And we think they're wrong because they're using outdated definitions dating back to the 60s and 70s to classify things. And our print industry, particularly under the expansion of digital printing, has just broadened so much that we're losing that voice that we have as an industry in context of the greater economy. So Printing United Alliance said, we need to get a uniform language so that we can get a better seat at the table. And we collectively, as a worldwide industry, can talk the same language so that we can now more accurately roll up data, we can size things, we can see growth rates, jobs, impact on the global economy, et cetera. So that was really the root of it. David.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right, Marco. And I think that one of this missing piece, this misunderstanding of what print is really so much more than newspapers and magazines, which is what kind of the U.S. government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's what they were tracking. How many newspapers? Well, there are not a lot of newspapers anymore, and there are not even a lot of magazines anymore. So they were starting to look at things like that, and and the volumes of it, and obviously the print industry has changed. Volumes are down, but the frequency is up, and the types of print applications have increased dramatically. As we started looking at this and looking at, how do we kind of help them understand what print is? We started looking at, what are the applications? What are the technologies? Because even the 60s and 70s, we didn't really have production inkjet. We didn't really, we barely had, in the early 70s, we barely had digital, in the form of electrophotographic. So, a lot of changes have occurred. So there was a lot of education needed to happen.
So what we did is we went through a process to try to identify who some of the key stakeholders would need to be to participate in this. And so we invited, and this is David and I, a select board of advisory members to join us on this adventure to come up with a new taxonomy. And board members on this advisory board include the Chief Technology Officer of HP, the CEO of Epson America, the CEO of Hunkler Finishing Systems. So we have a broad range of people who are contributing to this. We also went out of our way to make sure that we included European trade organizations, because we really want this to be a global standard, not just a US standard. So that was very important. So once we had the board in place, we then supplemented them with what we called distinguished experts and advisors. And so once we had sort of the major categories, we then drilled down to all these subcategories. And I think, David, I'm right in saying we have something like, I don't know, over 10,000 discrete sub-classifications in the end of it all. Maybe it's not that many, but it's a huge amount.
It's huge, and these distinguished experts that we pulled together are really they are just that. They are experts in their field globally that we went out to and we said, hey, look, this is what we're trying to do. Here's a list. Build on it. Correct it, edit it. What do you think? What is it? What are you calling it over there? What are we calling it over here? And try to continue to kind of refine that those discrete categories that or products and categories that we talked about.
So we came up with what was I think substantially completed infrastructure, right, of this taxonomy, but in life, right, there's all these unintended consequences. And so we've thought of everything, but we may not have. So to make sure we did catch it correctly, it's being pressure tested. And that's the phase we're going into now. And it was supposed to happen last year using Printing United Exposition as the test bed. But of course, that went virtual, unfortunately. It is going live this year, and that's where it's being pressure tested. So we want to make sure that, all the people who registered for the show can find the products that they're looking for. And we want to make sure they can filter it and vice versa, so that the exhibitors can also identify what category their prospects are in and the likes. So that's the process now. It will then be followed up by having it tested internally at some of the trade magazines. To make sure that it fits their classifications and that we didn't miss anything, including printing.org and so forth. Once that's done, then we're going to come up with some use cases and create basically tutorials and manuals, if you will, on how to use the taxonomy. All of that will probably take us through about mid-2023. Once we have that, then we're going to go back to the advisory board and present it to them for their formal vote of approving this taxonomy. And the reason for having a board is we don't want any individual, whether it's David or myself or Ford Bowers, who's the chairman and CEO of Printing United Alliance, to have a single decision-making vote. This needs to have collective buy-in. So that's why that board is so important. And of course, we want the members that are part of this advisory board to also internally adopt it so that they can be lighthouse users of this taxonomy and make sure it isn't just a wonderful document that collects dust on some shelf, right? We really want this to be adopted. And to that extent, David has done a huge amount of work in ensuring that all of the other key stakeholders in this process are aware of our efforts and are ready to adopt it. So Dave, tell us a little bit about.
Well, I think that's a very important point, Marco. Yes, we have to get the language right. It has to be in kind of the vernacular of the industry, of the global industry. All of the things that we're talking about here within the taxonomy itself. But more importantly, we have to get them to be able to adopt it. And that in itself is huge, because each of them have already adopted a certain way to classify their data and their products, et cetera. And there may be some need, as a matter of fact, there will be a need for them to now take that and remap it against the global standard. Is it going to be a little painful? Yeah, not that painful, but yes, it's going to be something that they probably are not, thinking about and looking forward to. When it is done, though, the advantages are huge, because now all of a sudden everybody is speaking the same language. We're able to communicate the same way. The consuming public in the form of print service providers, converters, et cetera, those people are going to be able to look and find things using a common vernacular. That's huge.
Well, and it's more important, Dave, because you were really, prescient in identifying that in order for this to truly be adopted, we need the national standards organizations to adopt it. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, GS1, right? ICS. There's lots of these bodies, and you've laid the groundwork for it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've already been in touch with all of them. The GS1 is ready when we are. The NACS, which is or NACS, which is kind of used by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but it's a separate organization. They're on board. They don't update as often as GS1. GS1 updates their standards once a year. NACS does it once every 3 to 5 years, I think it is. But all on board. We've had the conversations, and when we're ready, after it's gone through the pressure testing that Marco talked about, they're ready to work with us to kind of officially standardize each of the terms, the taxonomy, et cetera. So that in itself is again very huge. And once that's done, all of the government organizations, not just in the U.S. but around the world, can now have access to that information, so that they can basically assign numbers to the value of their industries, their local industries. We can begin to compare them in a much easier way. Right now, it's kind of you stick your finger in your mouth, you look for the wind and see what comes up. Nobody really knows. It's really very loosey-goosey right now.
Ashley, it sounds, very complicated, but in the end it is, right? The details are the devil's in the details. But in the end, this is incredibly important for the future of our industry, because if we indeed all have a uniform structure to talk about what's happening in all these various segments, and we can easily identify things, that's going to lift, the tide, so to speak, for all of us. And this is a seminal piece of work. I think, speaking on behalf of myself, and also of David, right? This might be one of the capstones of our careers. I mean, it sounds, grandiose, but truly, if we get this right, and it won't be instant, we'll have contributed something that's going to outlive us for years to come.
It's great. I think, the way that you've explained it, what a thoughtful process this sounds like it has been, and it will be. And I think you mentioned, it's not going to until mid 2023, going then to the for approval from the board. So there's a long process of getting this really, to the point where it needs to be for setting expectations and having it be what it needs to be for the industry. I think it's just incredible. So do you have plans for it to evolve? So once it gets to that stage where, it's kind of finalized and it can be accepted, into the vernacular of the industry, do you expect, in the future, we're going to have to revisit it to have Absolutely. It evolve with the technology? It's
just a living industry. It's going to change. It's going to continue to evolve. One of the problems that we have now is that in the standards bodies, it hasn't evolved. So we're fixed in 1960 or 70 or whatever it is. And we know that things are going to change. Technology changes. People, the demands are changing. And they keep following each other, and they go faster, and it's going faster and faster. So we expect that this will be a living document, and will evolve as the industry and the markets evolve.
Ashley, I think for anybody who's interested, we would encourage them to go to taxonomy.printing.org. That has a lot of the details in there, and we're thinking at the moment that will be the central contact point if anybody wants to alter or add to the taxonomy in the future. And what we'll do is, at some point, there'll be somebody whose job it will be to basically shepherd this. And when that happens, probably once a year, there'll be an advisory board meeting that will go through all the suggested changes and edits, and will either approve or reject them. And that way there'll be, it becomes really like a governing body of sorts.
And I can include information about that, the link that you just mentioned. Is that also where the full taxonomy will live if someone wants to refer to it?
That's the goal. Although, again, the taxonomies from a standard standpoint, that'll be more the working space. From a standard space, it's going to be at GS1 or at NASIX. That's where it's going to reside in standardized form. So there'll be a time lapse between when the taxonomy on taxonomy.printing.org is adopted, changed, whatever, adapted over the time, and then that has to then go back, and the standards have to be updated. Most likely, people will, if it's like any other standard, and I do a lot of work in standards. If it's like any other standard, what will happen is the people who have been paying attention will already have started to work within their systems to make the changes, so that when it officially is released by GS1 or by NASIX or whatever, they're already ready, to move ahead with it, and they turn it on.
So I would imagine, you've probably had conversations about this with other people in the industry. Have you had any feedback on how people are feeling about something like this being created? Yeah,
they're all very hungry. They want it to be now. They really do. I mean, I get calls, and I'm sure you would do too, Marco. It's like, oh, isn't it done yet? Is it done yet? Is it done yet? And it's hard because it is that much in need. The need is there. It's just that, we can't put it out before it's baked.
Yeah, the problem is if people start adopting a piecemeal now and it alters, then they're going to have to go and completely revisit it. So it's better, however much pressure is to as David says, fully bake it in first. Yeah. Rather than having to reinvent the wheel later, if you're somebody who's going to adopt this.
Yeah, we've seen this in standards development in the past, where, as I told you, when you're involved in the process, you kind of know what the answer is before everybody else does. So you start making changes, and then something happens, and at the last minute, and now you've made the change, they're not, the change is different, and you have to redo the work, and it's not pretty.
So obviously you talked about the process, kind of going through this testing phase, and obviously approval. So what does the launch look like, the launch date? Later in 2023 or?
Well, I think, as David said, it's not like a hard launch where, obviously once it's approved, that will be the official launch, right, by the advisory board. But the reality is it needs to be rolled out, right, into a GS1, the Global Standards Committee. Those are the guys that do all the barcodes, UPC codes and things like that. So once they have it in place, that's when it will really start functioning. And so GS1 is fairly quick in updating standards, but the US government, once every 5 years. And so it's a living document.
Yeah. And if you think about 5 years in kind of printing technology terms, or in dog years, that's a long time. A lot can happen in 5 years.
Well, great. I'm very excited for this. I think that this is just something that's been, needed for a long time. Is there anything else that you would want to say about it?
No, I think if anybody has something that they want to contribute, please come back to David, myself, look on the website and participate. It's not a unilateral standard. This is a true collaborative effort.
Great advice. And I will include the link below, and also I can include your contact information for our listeners. And I thank you again so much for joining me today, and I hope to have you back on a future episode.
All right. Thank you, Ashley.
Stick around because you won't want to miss my discussion with Mark Michelson. Want to join the entire printing industry in Vegas? Printing United Expo, taking place October 19th to the 21st, will span 2 halls of the Las Vegas Convention Center, encompassing 1 million gross square feet of booth space, all focused on print and supporting the industry. If you're looking for new equipment, networking, or education, Printing United Expo has you covered. Grab your team and explore aisles and aisles stacked with printing equipment, solutions, trends, and exhibitors ready to show you the latest and greatest in the industry. Save the date and head to printingunited.com to register today. So, hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me on today's podcast. We've worked together for the last 7 years, but I know you've been in the industry a little bit longer. I'm sure our listeners, many of them are already familiar with you, but can you just kind of remind me, how many years have you been working in the printing industry?
I'm a little embarrassed to say it, or I guess I should be proud to say it. 40, and it's getting closer to 41 than I went to 40. So it's hard to believe.
That's incredible. It's incredible. And I know you're just a wealth of knowledge. So that's why I was very excited to have you on today's show. So as you know, I spoke with Marco and David, and we talked about this global taxonomy that they're working on. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that, they talked about the genesis of the global taxonomy and kind of the general misunderstanding of what print really is and the evolution of the printing industry over the, past decades that have led us to this point. And as you mentioned, you've been, in the industry, writing about the industry for almost 41 years. So going off of something that David mentioned, which was this kind of, need for a better taxonomy because of this print evolution. Why do you think that this taxonomy matters? And do you believe that it'll more accurately help reflect the size and scope of the industry?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great endeavor because, the printing industry certainly is not as large as it used to be. I mean, at one point, it was the fourth or fifth largest manufacturing industry in the country, which, a lot of people outside the industry wouldn't even know that. In fact, a lot of people in the industry may not have realized that. So yes, it has gotten smaller. Some types of print have been displaced, but it's still a huge industry. And, the US government, and even on a worldwide basis, other governments, they don't realize the size and scope of our industry. And, there's so many segments, apparel, the whole wide format area has blossomed. The future of industrial printing, printing basically on any surface you can imagine. I mean, our industry is huge and it's going to get even bigger. But unfortunately, there's this perception out there within the government, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics stopped tracking the industry because they felt it was too small. So I think, to come up with a taxonomy that's more realistic and relevant to some of the products and technologies that are being used today. I mean, the world of inkjet opens up endless opportunities. So to have a more up-to-date taxonomy will hopefully help, just show the true size and scope of our industry rather than something outdated that the U.S. government tracked, literally decades ago and never updated.
Right. And I'm sure you've experienced this because I know I have, and I've only been in this industry for 7 years. So I cannot believe how many times I've told people that I am an editor, a writer for printing and packaging magazines, and people say, "Oh, like newspapers and magazines." Writing about that. And I was like, no, there's so much more that, people don't realize that are part of the printing industry. And I'm sure you've experienced that too, with people not really knowing the scope of it.
Right. And frankly, you mentioned newspapers and magazines. Well, newspapers especially, I mean, that's one of the biggest shrinking areas of our industry as, online news immediately. People don't want to get that daily paper or even worse, weekly paper, with outdated news because, we're the Amazon world. We want everything immediately. Mm-hmm. So, to look at newspapers and even printed magazines, unfortunately, that's an industry that's shrunk a lot. So, just to base it on, say, those two types of printed products is very inaccurate in terms of the real size and scope of the entire industry.
Right, right. And something that we had talked about prior to jumping on for this podcast, you had mentioned that you remembered seeing a list of, things with applications within the printing industry, and there was some wild stuff on there. I think, that kind of just shows that there's such a skewed perception of what the printing industry really is.
Right. They were tracking printed products that printers haven't produced probably since the 30s or 40s, as in 1930s or 40s. So it's very outdated, and it matters though, because government and politicians, they are going to appeal to and to give favoritism to those industries that they feel are big and powerful. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, that's the way the world works. And if we're thought of as being a dying or a shrinking industry, it's not good for us. Even I think on a global scale, and that's one of the other advantages of the taxonomy, that it will be trying to incorporate things on a global scale, because the printing industry in different parts of the world, different terminology, different things they might be measuring, and I think that will be helpful to us as a global industry, because I think our industry will become more global. We're talking different languages, but we're talking the same language when we're talking about printing terminology. And so, it's a monumental effort by Marco and David. It's not an easy project. And, I think as they discussed, it's really a project that has no end to it in some ways. It constantly has to be updated. I think for two people to say, with as many years of experience and so many things that they've been involved in the industry, that to reference this project as maybe something that they would view as maybe the top of the list of their legacy. I mean, that to me, that tells you just how important they see it. And, hopefully others in our industry will too, that this is, just not a endeavor just for the fun of it, that really will have long lasting benefit to the industry, and all segments in the industry and all constituents in the industry, whether suppliers, printers, analysts, people that track our industry, even journalists outside the industry that may find more information that's a little more accurate, like, whoa, I didn't realize that
right,
the industry is as vibrant as it is.
Yeah. And that was one of the things they brought up, that it would be constantly evolving, and this is going to be designed to be something that's a working taxonomy, and that we can keep updating as the printing industry evolves and flourishes and changes in different ways. So very exciting.
Yes, no, it really is. And it's quite an undertaking, because when you start thinking of creating a taxonomy and all the subcategories, and how granular do you get in some areas, and maybe not so much in other areas, it's there could be some barroom brawls in working, hashing that out as to what the final taxonomy that's presented to that advisory board is.
Right. Yeah, I do not envy the role and what they have ahead of them with this, because it's huge. It's a huge undertaking for sure.
But I think we have the two right people doing it, because just given their tenure in the industry, their knowledge and expertise, it really takes people at that level to try to figure this all out, because it's not a simple undertaking.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for joining me today. And I'm sure I'll have you back on another episode in the future.
Look forward to it. Okay. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah. I want to thank my guests today, Marco, David, and Mark, for joining me on this episode. And thank you to all of you, our listeners. Stay tuned for the next episode of Impressions Xchange podcast.